Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq, with daily insight on the Nasdaq-100 index, or the NDX, which is made up of 100 of the largest domestic and international non-financial innovative companies listed on Nasdaq. The NDX has been the barometer for U.S. large-cap growth and also one of the best performing indexes over the last decade and a half, not to mention one of the most liquid index ecosystems in the world. Joining us this Thursday afternoon, we have Joyce, Managing Director on Nasdaq's Market Intelligence Desk, for an update on technical levels to watch in the Nasdaq-100. We'll take a look at some of the other major averages as well as do some technical work on Bitcoin. Brian, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks. And it seems as if that volatility that we saw over the past couple of weeks has fizzled out a bit in the market.
Yeah, we had some deep oversold technical measures, particularly amongst, the value stocks like we see in the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the small and mid cap stocks, where those benchmarks are down more than 12%. The Dow had broken its 200-day. The Dow has actually recovered all major moving averages as of now. It's back even above its 20-day moving average. So it's recovered quite a bit. Nasdaq 100, did see some weakness within the breadth of the Nasdaq 100, but the price action, particularly when you look at that intermediate term time frame, had always remained constructive. The pullback, bottomed exactly where, at levels that we were looking at over the last couple of weeks.
Right, it certainly has. So let's pull up your Bloomberg here and take a look at some fresh levels, because you're right, we did see that movement in the breadth there, but really, it continues to, not really worry about that too much.
Yeah, and that's always going to be the case. It's always going to be some wall of worry for each individual sector, industry, benchmark, and so it's we're going to see some rotation amongst members within the index. This is the daily period chart of the Nasdaq 100, and we had this, what looked like a head and shoulders tapping pattern, and it did break that neckline, but you can see where it pulled back to bottom right on late last week at this prior high, and that's where we would expect to see support. It's now lifted higher. On Monday, you could see we gapped higher, but this is actually Tuesday, and then we stalled essentially yesterday and today right at that initial high made in early November. So that's, a level to keep looking at, to be paying attention to. I'd call it a minor resistance level from here. But, we do want to see the price get back above that eventually in time. When we look at this chart over the weekly time period, we can really see that the concern, at least for this index, was very minor. And, this is a long-term trend of the last 10 years. But if we zoom in, looking over the last 12, 14 months, we can see this clearly defined trend line right here. All pullbacks have tested that level and held support. And this pullback over the last 2 weeks, it didn't even get to that trend line. We, again, like we saw in the daily chart, we bottomed right at this prior high, which is right around that 15,700 level, 15,700. So very constructive here. The weekly momentum reading, the RSI, actually made a higher high, bottomed around 57.5 last week. So nothing concerning there. The breadth we noted had been getting weaker, but price is king, and price has been holding up. So can't really just be too concerned about breadth when you're looking at the index as a whole.
Right, and Brian, I want to talk about Bitcoin. We haven't looked at that chart in quite some time, and certainly Bitcoin does as Bitcoin does, and it has the volatility in the trading. It just seems to be one of the characteristics. With that, at this point now, who knows as we get more institutional adoption and more products being launched. But it's interesting. I had a strategist on a couple of weeks ago saying that she thought we could get to 60 to 70,000. Early in 2022, I had the CEO of Celsius Networks on just the other day. He thinks we could see anywhere from 140 to 160 in the first half of 2022. He also predicted Bitcoin 30,000 at the end of 2020, and as we got into January 1st, 2021, on the morning of, 4 minutes after or something like that, it hit 30,000. So yeah, anything's possible.
This here is an annual performance table of Bitcoin, and it has years of 5,000, 1,400%. Last year is up 300%. Now year to date, it's up 65%. We did have a pullback of about 35 to 40% over the last month or so. So, but relative to what this animal can do, it's a monster. That's a relatively small pullback. That's easy to say for me, for not having a lot of skin in the game, but when you just look at this uptrend, it's just phenomenal. And so you're going to see bigger pullbacks. And even with big moves like a 40% decline, you can still certainly argue from a technical perspective, the uptrend is still intact. So here we have, a pretty wide range between, let's call it 29,000 and 61,000. That's a 40,000 point range. I should say 30,000 point range, give or take. If we break out to the upside convincingly here, then, I could certainly see 90,000. That's just basic technical price projection there based on the width of this range, and you add that to the top of the range. So it certainly would not surprise me at all. Again, conversely, you could argue this is a large double top pattern. I wouldn't even go there with that. It's, when you're investing in Bitcoin and any cryptocurrency or any instrument for that matter that has such strong price action, you just certainly need to know what your time frame is, what your investment horizon is. You're a buy and hold, or you're more of a short-term trader. And if you're short-term, you need to know what your price levels are, where you would get out even before you get in.
Yep, well, it's definitely a great vehicle if you're longer term with the hodlers, or if you're, a shorter term trader. Something for everyone there, Brian. Appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.